Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So in this one, I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive on new Jets defensive coordinator Steve Wilks. Because we all know the importance of play callers, especially with this Jets team, right? I mean, say what you want about Saleh as a head coach, and I mean, tons of people had a lot of issues with Robert Saleh's, maybe coaching style and whatnot. But as soon as he left and Jeff Ulbrich took over as head coach and still stuck with calling plays on the defensive side of the football, it seemed like they fell off a cliff. It just seemed like the preparation was not there, the in-game adjustments were not there, the overall game planning was not there as well. It was just a complete mess. And so to kind of shift back into this mold where it's a CEO style of head coach, we have our offensive coordinator in Tanner Engstrom doing his thing. And then, of course, on the defensive side of the football, it's going to be Steve Wilks. Now, Wilks has had a pretty long tenured NFL career so far as a coach, getting his first crack at the NFL level back in 2005 with Washington. And then after Washington, bounced around a little bit, Chicago Bears for 3 years, then to the San Diego Chargers for 3 years, primarily working as a DB or secondary coach, and ultimately becomes a mainstay on the Ron Rivera coaching staff, right? So he is kind of a disciple of that, that Rivera lineage, right? Sean McDermott, same tree, coming in from, going to Buffalo from Carolina. But Wilks really paid his dues, right? 9 straight years as a DB coach, then becomes the assistant head coach for the Carolina Panthers in 2015, 16, and 17, and only had that 1 year as defensive coordinator in 2017, and then gets the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job in 2018. Now, to be fair, that season was just an absolute disaster, right? A total lack of talent. It just felt like there was a lack of overall discipline with that Cardinals team. Quarterback questions, right? Sam Bradford, he gets hurt. Josh Rosen, is he developing? Did they really put a good infrastructure around Josh Rosen on the offensive side of the football? The team was just losing a bunch of games, and they parted ways after one season, hiring Cliff Kingsbury. And really during that season and after he was fired, there's a lot of talk of, hey, you know what? Was this guy really ready to be a head coach at the NFL level? Probably not. A lot of people wanted to see him kind of work as a defensive coordinator for at least a couple more seasons and then maybe get back in the saddle as a head coach a couple years down the line. But anyway, after Arizona's firing, he bounces over to Cleveland and puts up a decent season, right? It's not this elite season. And I will say it was maybe a bit concerning because of the amount of talent on that defensive side of the football for Cleveland, right? Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi, Demarius Randall at safety coming in from Green Bay. Ideally you would like to see that Browns defense perform a little bit better. He was let go. Right, so back-to-back years, Steve Wilks has been let go from his duties. You look at 2020. It was obviously the virus year, and he was out of football. 2021, he spent it with the Missouri Tigers at the collegiate level and was the defensive coordinator. Comes back to the NFL to reunite with the Carolina Panthers as secondary coach, as well as passing game coordinator. 5 games into the year, Matt Rule gets fired, right? 1-4 start. That was just like an overall disaster of a year, right? It's just a turnstile at quarterback. Is it Mayfield? No. Is it Sam Darnold? No. PJ Walker? It just cycling through different quarterbacks. He kind of just felt like, what was really the vision? What was the identity with that Panthers team? No one really knew. But when Wilks took over, this is kind of what re-sparked all of the Steve Wilks maybe buzz in the NFL. He takes over as interim head coach. A 1-4 football team, he goes 6-6 and gets kind of this mess of a situation to second in the NFC South in just that short 12-game period. And so there was buzz after the year like, okay, you know what? Let's bring Steve Wilks back. He got the most out of this mess of a situation. The ownership situation is at that point was kind of odd. You never really knew what exactly was going to happen, and they don't bring him back. There was a lot of upset fans about it, right? Not saying that Steve Wilks is, some top 3, top 5 head coach in football, but it was like, okay, you know what? This guy obviously connects to the guys in the locker room and they're playing hard for him. They go with Frank Reich. They trade up to the number 1 pick. They select Bryce Young, and then Frank Reich is fired not even, 1 year into his tenure there. And then they start over again. But I digress. Steve Wilks, after he didn't get the full-time Panthers gig in 2022, he goes to the San Francisco 49ers and actually puts up the best season, statistically speaking, of his career. By the numbers, it was very, very, very impressive. The 49ers make it to the Super Bowl and they lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. And you kind of felt like, okay, you know what, the 49ers, like, they're forced into making a change. A lot of people felt like Steve Wilks was scapegoated after the great year. Now, to be fair, that 49ers defense had a ton of great players. Fred Warner, Nick Bo, I mean, the list goes on, right? Like, I could sit here for 5 to 10 minutes talking strictly about that Niners defense, but in the end, Steve Wilks was let go. So you're taking a look at, really 2017, that last season as Panthers DC. Let's just skip over the Cardinals mess, right, as head coach, because Steve Wilks is not the head coach of this football team. He's the DC. So 2017, that Panthers defense was great. It was actually above average in pretty much every major statistical category: yards, takeaways, points. 2019 with the Browns, a little below average, a little concerning. It is what it is. Again, back to 2022, very, very, very impressive stuff as interim head coach, kind of getting the players to rebuy back in to the system over there. 2023, best season as a defensive coordinator yet. 2024, he is a consultant back at the collegiate level with the Charlotte 49ers. Now we're looking ahead at this season, 2025. What does Steve Wilks bring to the table? What can we expect? So over that period, right, 2017 to 2023, there was a lot of blitzing. It's always kind of felt like Steve Wilks has opted for the blitz. Again, from 2017 to 2022, the Steve Wilks defenses have always been top 10 in blitzing. Wilks is also versatile, right? He's comfortable running a system with 3 down linemen. He's comfortable running a system with 4 down linemen. You're listening to Aaron Glenn talk about Steve Wilks and, kind of the belief level in him, the fact that he's been a head coach before, the fact that he has called plays before, the fact that he is kind of a veteran coach in football, and that they're also aligned in their way of thinking. So my best guess to what we can expect from this Jets defense is a multiple defense. I am not going to be surprised if we see a bunch of different looks involving a bunch of different players, right? Because Aaron Glenn has experience in a 3-4 style of defense as well. You go back and look at that first year with the Detroit Lions. They didn't have the style of roster to run his 4 down linemen style that we saw the last 2 years, because it was the carryover from the Patricia era, right, where it was similar to what the New England Patriots ran. Again, 3 down linemen, you have these stand-up outside linebackers, and it was similar to when Greg Williams took over from Todd Bowles, right? Greg Williams comes in with Adam Gase, and we all kind of saw what he did with the St. Louis Rams and LA Rams, 4 down linemen. He was a part of the Cleveland Browns as well. A lot of Jets fans were expecting a 4-3 style of attack. That wasn't the case. Why wasn't it the case? Because in Williams' words, the roster was built 4-3-4. It's too big of an overhaul to change in one off season. Let's just stick to the 3-4. And Greg Williams actually had a lot of success in that year, relatively speaking, looking at the roster. I also really like how Steve Wilks has a background in defensive backs, right? Going back and looking at his career all those years as a DB coach, I think that's going to bode well for the current DBs on the roster. Why? Because they're all, for the most part, young and super talented. Take your pick: Gardner, Carter, Stevens, Cisco, newcomer Malachi Moore, Tony Adams is a pretty young player, Quantez Stiggers, AZ Thomas, as a depth option at boundary corner. Like, there is so much youth and so much talent in this room. I love having 2 guys that have so much experience. Think about some of the corners that Steve Wilks has worked with: Denzel Ward, Josh Norman with the Carolina Panthers, right? Like, they're on top of it, Aaron Glenn's track record, right? Even the safety development, Marcus Williams back with New Orleans, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph. Like, gosh, man, like, there's so many stories or maybe examples that we can point to of a young, talented DB safety or corner, slot, outside, take your pick. And we can just look at that overall growth or progress from those positions. So I'm excited to see how this defense looks. I do feel like there's going to be some problems maybe early on, just, new regime, new stylist system, new players and everything that everyone's, going to have to get accustomed to. But I think over time, just having that defensive voice in Glenn and Steve Wilks' experience, I think that's going to bode well, again, long term for this Jets defense. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, go Jets.